Have you ever believed that the CIA once saw Mars as it was 1 million years ago, not through a telescope, but through the power of the mind? Not rocks, dust, or CO2, but dying giant beings, magnificent structures drowned in despair, and an energy gateway leading to a place no one can define. The question is, what did they really see? And why was this document kept secret for over 30 years? If you think this is just another conspiracy theory, wait until you hear everything I'm about to tell you, because sometimes the truth doesn't come through a telescope, but through things we dare not believe are real. Would you believe me if I told you that one afternoon in 1984, a man sat alone in a small room with nothing but a pen and a sheet of paper and saw Mars as it was 1 million years before Christ? No, you didn't mishear. 1 million years, a time when even Earth was still wild and raw, without humanity, without any recorded civilization. And yet, at that same moment, on the red planet, tens of millions of kilometers away, a man, not an astronaut, not a scientist, claimed he was seeing the fall of a civilization. And the strangest part, this wasn't a hallucination, nor a sci-fi prank. It was an intelligence operation carried out by the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States. It all began with a file declassified in the year 2000, titled Mars Exploration, Mai 22, 1984. Inside was a detailed transcript of a remote viewing session, a technique claimed to allow people to see distant locations with their mind, crossing not just space, but time. In this experiment, a subject, also referred to as a sub, was guided to focus on specific coordinates. But he wasn't told what he was looking at. He wasn't told it was Mars. No maps, no images, just a cold, clinical instruction from the monitor. Focus your attention on the following coordinates. And what happened next left everyone in the room utterly silent. The subject said he saw a landscape filled with sandstorms, a sky, murky orange like diluted blood, enormous triangular structures, like pyramids, partially buried in sand, with only the pointed tips exposed. He described pathways, open spaces, vast chambers resembling shelters or communal hubs, all eerily silent. Silent in a way that suggested something had once lived there, but had long since departed. Then came the part that made readers of the report shudder. The sub said he saw tall, thin beings, very human-like but not human. They wore robes, standing still like broken stone statues. In his vision, they weren't afraid. They were weary, as if they had fought for a long time against something impossible to resist. Time, climate, extinction. He said they were waiting for someone to return, a line that might sound poetic, even vague, but to those reading the transcript, it struck a deep, unsettling chord. These weren't random creatures. They had faith, they had memory, and they were not alone. Then, at another point, following the monitor's instruction, the subject was told to shift time to a moment of great upheaval. And so, he described, "I see massive shockwaves. Something has just exploded. The atmosphere is dense with dust. Light is being strangled. Everything has fallen into an eerie stillness. A planetary catastrophe. No one knows the cause, but the result was clear. Mars had died. Yet, not everyone chose to remain." The sub continued, "I see a large object like a spacecraft. There are beings boarding it. They're not taking much, but they are taking hope." And when the monitor asked, "Where do you think they're going?" the answer came like a knife, slicing through the imagination. "They're looking for another place. Perhaps Earth?" Pause for a moment. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, how could someone who didn't even know the target was Mars describe the orange-red atmosphere, the pyramid-like structures, and the tall humanoid beings, all of which align with modern scientific hypotheses? Was it coincidence, or was it something the CIA had always known, but never truly disclosed? Those who've studied the CIA's Stargate project will know this wasn't the only time they used remote viewing. They trained many individuals, including military personnel, to use the mind to view enemy installations, and sometimes their results were frighteningly accurate. Some records even describe underground objects, encrypted documents, or hidden sites that satellites had never seen. So if the CIA trusted this site technology enough for military use, why did they apply it to Mars? The answer can only be, they were searching for something greater than earthly secrets. A species that once existed, a civilization that was destroyed, a migration whose descendants might still live within our very blood. I know, it sounds insane, but consider the coincidences. Why did ancient civilizations like Egypt, the Maya, and the Sumerians all speak of giants from the skies? Why do pyramids, structures still not fully understood today, appear in various places around the world with no known contact between them? And why do we see long-headed, large-eyed, unusually tall beings depicted in ancient statues and carvings? Are these random, or are they memories? The final lines of the CIA transcript contain a small note. Easy to miss? Subject appears emotionally distressed, reports a sense of loss, of ancient tragedy, a feeling of ancient loss, a tragedy buried in time. But who knows? Perhaps that memory still whispers through dreams, through myths, through the haunted gaze of that man from 1984. And now, with the transcript made public, the question is no longer, did he really see it? But why did he see it so accurately? Do you dare believe that we are not the beginning, but only a continuation? That Mars is not a dead rock, but a vast tomb, waiting to be unearthed through human memory? If what that man saw truly was the memory of a dead planet, then what are we facing? An extraordinary imagination, a psychological experiment, or a doorway, barely ajar, into a history that never belonged to humankind. What makes the CIA transcript truly terrifying is not the sandstorms or buried structures, but the emotion in the viewer's account, a kind of emotion no one can fake. I see them, in despair. They're trying to communicate. They can't move, but they know the end is near. They need help, but no one comes. That's what the remote viewer said. A deeply human description of a species we think never existed. There is something profoundly human in the eyes of those beings. And the next haunting question is, if they once lived, did they leave anything behind? Modern science has now confirmed that Mars once had water, once had a stable climate, once had a magnetic field, all the basic conditions to sustain life. Millions of years ago, the red planet might have been greener, warmer, more vibrant. But what turned it into a dead world? Scientists talk about the loss of its magnetic field, which allowed solar winds to strip away its atmosphere. Other theories suggest meteor impacts or geological activity caused a global catastrophe, but all of it remains speculation. And strangely, in the CIA report, the man saw an explosion, a shockwave, columns of dust rising into the sky. He didn't know what caused it, but he could feel it, as if that memory wasn't a foreign image, but something etched deep into his subconscious. So, if we suppose that there was once a civilization on Mars, could it have been advanced enough to destroy itself? We, on Earth, have witnessed that possibility. In just a few centuries of technological advancement, humanity has created weapons capable of planetary annihilation. We've stood at the brink of nuclear war more than once. So what makes us think, if there were another civilization out there, they wouldn't have made the same mistake? Or perhaps they already did. Some non-mainstream researchers have suggested that the beings on Mars, if they ever existed, may have reached an incredibly advanced level of technology, but perished because of their own unchecked progress. It could have been war. It could have been experimentation with energy, or even a space-related accident beyond our current understanding. But what's particularly striking is this. In the report, when asked to follow those beings to the next stage of their journey, the viewer saw something like a spaceship, a large vessel with biological chambers, cryo-sleep pods, and behind them, the collapse of a world. They weren't departing to explore. They were evacuating to where? The man didn't give a clear answer. He only said, the place they're going has many mountains. The climate seems warm. There's a gentle breeze. The sky is not red, it's blue. Where did they go? In many people's minds, the answer leaps forward instantly. Earth. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe it's a misinterpretation. But if you connect what was described in the remote viewing session with the strange accounts found in ancient legends, a chain of details appears that's not so easy to dismiss. Take a look at the records of ancient Egypt. They spoke of gods who came from the sky, bringing knowledge, building pyramids, teaching humans about mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, and astrology. The Maya had similar stories, telling of sky beings with unusual appearances who lived in stone houses above. Why do civilizations separated by thousands of years and oceans tell the same story? Some say it's just imagination. But whose imagination? And why is it so consistent? Back to the CIA, an agency not exactly known for its interest in folklore. Why were they even concerned with a mission to see ancient Mars? They didn't need that for the Cold War. They didn't need to know what Mars looked like a million years BC to beat the Soviets, unless they were searching for the answer to a bigger question. Where does humanity come from? Because if a species once left Mars to seek refuge, and Earth was their destination, what does that mean for us? Could it be that we are not the first owners of this planet? Could it be that the dreams of gods are not fantasy, but memory? Memories so ancient they've been blurred by time. There's a part in the CIA report that very few people notice. When the monitor asked the remote viewer if he saw anything resembling a space control station or a signal transmitter, he responded, "There's a place that looks like an observatory. They're trying to communicate, but they know the signal won't be answered. It's like sending out a call for help into the void, a cry for help, abandoned, or a message for the next generation." I'm not saying all of this is fact, but it paints a picture worth pondering. Maybe, somewhere in our genetic code, fragments of memory still linger, echoes from an ancient civilization. Not from Earth, but from the sky. That doesn't make us less special. On the contrary, it opens up a far more captivating question. If we carry the legacy of another planet within us, what responsibility do we hold for Earth today? They lost their world. We might lose ours if we learn nothing from them. In other words, if Mars once had a civilization that was wiped out, are we humans walking the exact same path? And then, another question quietly forms, without fanfare, but suffocating in its weight. If a civilization once existed on Mars, what stopped them from coming back? Did they fall into oblivion like the ruins buried beneath dust and sand? Or did they leave something behind? Not spacecraft or advanced technology, but memory. Fragments of memory carefully embedded through symbols, through architecture, through DNA, or even through us. I can't help but think about the small details the remote viewer described. He didn't just see one place, but a series of locations on Mars. Ancient lands with pyramid-shaped structures, stone corridors, observatory towers, and deep pits that seemed like shelters, all described with uncanny precision, as if he wasn't imagining them, but remembering. In one segment, he said, there is a being very tall, very thin, with a large head, sleeping, or more accurately, being made to sleep. It feels like it's not dead, but not alive either, like it's waiting for something to happen. Waiting for what? That chilling feeling begins to sketch another scenario, a form of life or intelligence still operating, somewhere in silence or waiting to be reawakened. And placed in a broader context, that idea becomes disturbingly plausible. Imagine if humanity is the successor of a civilization that once thrived on Mars, and if their memories, knowledge, or essence still linger somewhere. Are we unknowingly living a cycle that's already played out? I'm reminded of the theory proposed by Dr. John Brandenburg, a plasma physicist who once worked with NASA, who claimed that Mars once hosted a civilization, and it was wiped out by an ancient nuclear explosion, a claim dismissed as madness by mainstream science. But if you align it with the CIA documents' descriptions of blinding light, of sudden collapse, is it really that implausible? It's as if there are two parallel worlds. One is the science we are taught, in which Mars is a barren, lifeless planet. The other is the hazy memory of a man who saw things that defy understanding. But is there truly no evidence? Let's talk about the strange phenomena NASA has yet to explain. Hundreds of photos of the Martian surface show triangular structures, domes, corridors, or even face-like formations, like those found in the Cydonia region, anomalies in local magnetic fields, as if parts of Mars were torn apart, not by nature, but by a force of destruction. And the discovery of xenon-129, a radioactive isotope in the Martian atmosphere, which on Earth is typically associated with nuclear detonations. Any of these data points, taken individually, can be dismissed. But when connected with the 1984 remote viewing account, you begin to see a terrifying picture emerge. Mars was once alive, then something came, fast, fierce, and without mercy, turning everything to dust. But what if they truly escaped? What if part of them reached another place, not just to survive, but to continue something left unfinished? Another detail from the CIA report. The viewer described a place that looked like a greenhouse, with spherical devices containing swirling energy inside, and beings in a state of communicating through thought. Without language, he described a sensation that nothing there had time. Everything was waiting for a signal to start again. That hints at a possibility that sends chills down your spine. What if their intelligence was preserved, not in bodies, but in another form? A kind of energy, a biological database, or perhaps within the collective consciousness itself. If you've ever heard of the Akashic Records, a cosmic library said to contain all knowledge, memories, and experiences of every being that has ever existed, you'll recognize the parallel. And if humans can access that realm through the subconscious, as with remote viewing, then perhaps the 1984 document isn't a work of imagination, but an invisible, indirect contact, a signal from another dimension, a memory from a life that never truly vanished. A warning: the line between science and belief has been blurring in recent years. When AI can decode ancient genomes, when quantum physics proposes parallel existences, and when government documents like Mars exploration are declassified, truth suddenly becomes harder to define than ever. So if those beings are still waiting, what are they waiting for? A signal from Earth, a certain threshold in human consciousness, a soul who can finally hear them. I know, all of this sounds like science fiction, but when the document lies in the CIA's own declassified archives, when its descriptions eerily align with ancient legends, and when science begins to toe the line between matter and perception, then the boundary between reality and imagination has long been erased. So let me ask you, what makes you so certain that we are the only intelligent species to have ever existed in this solar system? Do you really have an answer? Or are you simply walking in the footsteps of a forgotten civilization? One that once loved, once fought, once lost everything, and left behind a single message. Don't repeat us, but to truly understand what might have happened to that ancient civilization, if it really existed, as described in the CIA report, we have to return to a deeply human concept: memory and repetition. Because history, as we often pride ourselves in rewriting it, is not a straight line. It's a spiral, a loop of arrogance and blindness, where every civilization that reaches its peak believes it is the final act, the ultimate Everest of intelligence, only to collapse from the same fatal flaw: pride. Have you ever wondered, why didn't the beings described by the CIA's remote viewer try to save themselves? They had vast structures, mysterious swirling energy, the ability to communicate telepathically. Yet in the end, they simply waited for something beyond their own control. Perhaps they had evolved intellectually beyond measure, but had lost the primal instinct to survive. Or, more frightening, perhaps they already knew that no effort would ever be enough, a form of collapse that came from within, not a natural disaster, not war, but a loss of balance between soul and intellect, expansion to the point of meaninglessness. They no longer knew why they were alive. Perhaps, when they left Mars, if that really happened, they didn't carry hope with them anymore, only a fragment of themselves, compressed into memory, sent out across the universe, or more simply, sent into those who could hear them. And that is precisely what makes the remote viewing mission so special. Not just a spiritual experiment, it's like an accepted call, an old data packet being unzipped when the right frequency is reached. Could it be that the remote viewer in 1984 accidentally triggered a piece of memory encoded millions of years ago? Memory, a word that sounds poetic. But if you've ever read about epigenetics, you'll know memories of trauma, fear, or survival can, in fact, be transmitted through DNA, and if an ancient civilization once went extinct, who's to say they didn't try to implant part of themselves into a new species? Us, the ones who always gaze at the sky, always feel like we don't belong here, always haunted by strange dreams of stone gates, red eyes, or pyramids in icy deserts. Could we be their descendants? Or at least the carriers of their indirect memories? I can't be sure, but let me tell you something strange. In 1976, NASA's Viking spacecraft took a now famous photo of the Cydonia region, where a giant face-like structure appeared to look skyward. NASA later declared it a trick of light, but higher resolution images later showed symmetry, abnormal elevation, and even stone blocks aligned in logical axes. Those who study ancient structures on Mars believe it could not be mere coincidence. And if you place that side by side with the CIA transcript, a place shaped like a human head, nestled among small pyramids, you'll shiver. You may think that's just a coincidence, but it's from such coincidences that theories begin to form. One of the most debated, yet quietly circulated within certain space observation circles, is the theory of directed panspermia. This idea posits that life, or intelligence, did not begin on Earth, but was seeded here by a civilization from elsewhere. Just a small part, enough to begin again, but not enough to remember. We're born with hazy memories, a nameless longing, a pull toward the stars, a sense that we once came from somewhere else, and for that reason, perhaps the CIA's remote viewing experiment wasn't just about testing psychic abilities, but about accessing an invisible data archive left behind by our distant ancestors. A kind of portal that doesn't require machines, only consciousness. Because, as some quantum physicists believe, consciousness may exist outside the three-dimensional space. And the ancient mind may have known this. If you've ever heard of projects like Stargate Project, Sun Streak, or Center Lane, you'll know the CIA never took these abilities lightly. They spent decades, millions of dollars, and hundreds of experimental sessions trying to guide remote viewers to travel across time, across planets, across dimensions, not for fun, but because they knew something needed to be unlocked. And suppose, just suppose, that during one of those sessions, they reached Mars. They saw what was left. They understood that a civilization had once existed and fallen into oblivion, only to send back a warning through time. So what was that warning? Could it be connected to the giant ships once spotted in Nevada skies? To the flood of declassified UFO documents in recent years? Or to the strange behaviors of space agencies themselves, like hiding data, sudden camera shutdowns, or indefinitely delaying missions that might return to Cydonia? Could it be that some people in the government, or in even more powerful institutions, already know this truth and keep it to themselves? Not because it's terrifying, but because it's power. Because think about it. If you held the knowledge that humanity is not the beginning, that we are merely the next chapter of something once mighty and fallen, you wouldn't just possess a story. You'd have leverage over the very nature of being human. You would know that we can be reset at any moment. And what chokes me as I write this is not the possibility of a vanished ancient civilization. It's the quiet question knocking on every cell. Are we on the same path? Could it be that in witnessing the collapse of Mars, we're seeing our own future, just played out earlier in the timeline? We too build monumental structures. We too chase after technology, AI, data, space colonization. But are we losing our soul? The same way they once did. Maybe the message isn't in the images, not in the maps, not even in the DNA, but in humanity's collective consciousness. A lingering ache, something that keeps us gazing at the stars without knowing why. Maybe it's a calling us home. Where to? Maybe it's not about a place, but about ourselves. that deepest part within, untouched by data, markets, or weapons, a place where we can still hear, feel, and remember, not with the mind, but with our oldest intuition, the instinct for compassionate survival. If you've read this far, I only want to ask you one thing, a question perhaps the Martian civilization once asked themselves, but too late to answer. Are we moving toward evolution, or spiraling back into the abyss of forgetting? The remote viewer in 1984 described an eerily silent moment. I see giant beings trying to escape the planet, but they seem to know they'll never make it in time. That sentence, calm as a narration, holds something that chills you to the bone, the feeling of a truth we ourselves don't dare name. Was there once a civilization that looked up to the sky in despair, just as we do now? Did they build empires, create systems, develop technologies, only to realize it was all a cycle that ends the same: ambition, conflict, extinction. We live in a world proud of its ability to explore space. But ask yourself, are satellites and probes launched into the cosmos searching for hope? Or are we running away? Running from what? Perhaps from the truth that we've lost the essence of being human. We use AI to replace emotions, technology to control memory, information to manipulate truth. And one day, we may no longer be able to tell belief from power games. And the most terrifying thing, even those in charge no longer know what game they're playing. At the end of the CIA transcript, the monitor asks the remote viewer, "Are they still alive?" And he responds, "I don't know. I think they're sleeping, waiting for someone to help. A civilization, waiting to be saved. But waiting for who? Us? Or a rebirth? If consciousness can exist beyond the physical body, as many quantum scientists and theologians suggest, then it means their consciousness may still be out there. In space, in memory, in the dreams of children born with eyes that gaze far beyond. Have you ever met children like that? 3-year-olds drawing maps of planets, speaking strange words, telling stories of red storms, rooms of light. Fathers they've never met. Science calls it imaginative syndrome or past life memory. But what if it's not imagination? What if it's memory, left over from an unwritten past? In the closing segment of the CIA transcript, the remote viewer describes there's a device, like an energy gate, a spiral structure, and it connects them to somewhere else. But it's out of balance, and they vanish. A spiral structure, an energy gate, connection to another dimension. We're no longer talking science fiction. We're approaching the threshold of what modern theoretical physicists are beginning to accept. This universe is not merely three-dimensional, and perhaps not even the only one. Hypotheses like multiverse, mirror universe, or nested universes are being fed into serious mathematical models. And if an ancient civilization had reached that level of spatial awareness, their disappearance may not mean death. They may have moved, but moved where? One theory is terrifying, yet logical. They didn't leave us. They're still here, but at a frequency we cannot perceive, like radio waves, which you cannot hear without the right receiver. And if that's true, then perhaps those moments of remote viewing, like the CIA's, or near-death experiences, regression hypnosis, déjà vu, are all moments when human frequencies brush against theirs, a subconscious connection. The question then is, what are they trying to say? Maybe they don't speak in words. They leave symbols, structures, unanswered questions, pyramids that belong to no civilization, cave paintings of flying objects impossible for the time, undecipherable markings on the moon, Phobos, clues, repeating, and we, in our arrogance as self-proclaimed firsts, brushed it all aside, calling it myth, superstition, pseudoscience. But if you ask me, what makes you believe they really existed? My answer isn't in documents or theories. It's in the silence of the universe. The universe is so vast, it's absurd, and yet so suspiciously quiet. Why no reply? Why no signal? No contact? Perhaps because it already happened. The conversation is over, and now only the echo remains. An echo hidden in an old document from 1984, where a man, with just coordinates, described a civilization never known, with a sadness no words can explain. I've read that description 10 times, and at the end, where he says, "I see them waiting for someone. Someone will come and wake them," I ask myself, could we be the ones, not to save anyone, but to remember the lesson we are about to forget? Because what destroys a civilization isn't inferior technology or devastating war. It's when they no longer know why they exist, when everything becomes a tool, and nothing remains sacred. Do you feel that happening now? When humanity debates artificial intelligence, but forgets compassion. When we pour money into space while children starve. When information floods us, but truth becomes rare. Maybe the warning from Mars doesn't lie in stone, data, or swirling gates, but in our own reflection. When we look and no longer recognize who we are, we've become like them, the giant beings, alone, silent, waiting for something that we ourselves can't name. And if you, like me, have come along this journey to the very last moment, then I have just one question for you. If you could say something to that lost civilization, what would it be? Or more precisely, if they are watching you right now, how would you live to be worthy of their gaze? Some stories are not meant to be told, but to awaken. And some documents, like the CIA's report on Mars, are not just questions about the past, but a mirror to our present. We continue to take pride in our technological progress, still lift our heads toward the cosmos with ambition. But amid the satellites, rockets, and data, have we kept the most fundamental question? Why do we exist? If a civilization as brilliant as Mars once fell into silence, what protects us from repeating the same fate? The greatest lesson they left behind isn't in structures or artifacts, but in their silence. And within that silence is an echo of a message. Don't repeat us. Live with the awareness that every action, every choice we make today, not only shapes the future, but answers the past. Because if they were once here, and they can see us now, would we give them hope? If you think this is a topic worth reflecting on, leave a comment below. What do you think the CIA really saw? Share this video with friends if you believe some questions should never be forgotten. And don't forget to subscribe, because we'll return with many more truths, hidden just behind what you thought you already knew.